Time Warp with John Romero and Craig Johnston.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Apple Time Warp. Hey John, we haven't spoken since October 2020. How you doing?
Doing really great in the time of COVID.
We're at the end of it now, I hope.
Yeah, it's looking like it.
Yeah. So today we have the esteemed Chuck Beuche on, and I'm going to play my hand and say that Chuck, Caverns of Callisto is my fave, but we want to talk about all of your Apple II games. So hey Chuck, welcome. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well.
Excellent.
Yeah, you're in San Francisco right now, right?
I am in San Francisco. It's 9 o'clock in the morning. Where, what is it, 5 o'clock for you?
Wow.
John?
Yeah, it's 5 o'clock. I'm in Ireland, in Galway, in the West Coast. And then where are you at, Craig?
In New York, East Coast, U.S.
Oh, my. Okay.
Isn't that great?
So through the wonders of technology, we can all talk.
It's 2021, yeah. Chuck, you did a Matt chat in 2014 with Matt Barton. Really great interview. It was really nice because this is a podcast, so it's not visual, but, well, I think that Craig can do some things. But there was some really good video gameplay of some of the stuff that you were talking about in there, especially really early games and stuff that you made. And I'm going to go back to when you met Richard in high school. Richard Garriott.
Yep. Yes.
And you went to high school with him. Now, I think I heard that he actually introduced you to computers.
That is completely true. Yeah.
How'd that happen?
So, all right, it goes back. We had, believe it or not, I have to say, I don't know if it's fair to say with some embarrassment or not, but we had a Dungeons and Dragons group that would get together every week. And so I met him. I met him through that. We ended up rooming together early in college. God, so many stories.
Yeah.
and let me think back the whole bit. So, yeah, I left the Air Force Academy after the first semester, and we roomed first in our second semester freshman year. And he had already made a Calabath in his, the storied, he developed it in his closet at home. And let me think, he wasn't allowed to have a computer or something, but anyway, he was doing fine for a starving college freshman with a Calabath. And he said, Chuck, you can do this. You should make a computer game. And strangely, I didn't have a computer, so I wrote the first two games in a Laugh Pack on his computer. We at that time we had moved and we were living in across the hall from each other in an apartment complex, and so he got me started, and in fact I started on his computer.
So you made your first couple games on there. Now, wasn't your first game Brain Teaser Boulevard?
No, wait. Yes, it was. That, and I would love. I actually saw one of those on eBay for sale. That
rare, very rare.
They're very rare, but it actually was sold. And I'm trying to remember back. Gosh, I would have to go to my notes because it went through a couple of different names even, but I believe it was published by
California Pacific Computer,
as Brain Teaser Boulevard, and it was how does one say it? Well, it was a derivative work.
It was basically like Frogger, where you're helping old people across the highway.
That was it. Yeah.
And what old person wants to walk across a 6-lane highway? I thought it was great, especially when the trucks ran you guys over.
Yeah. Yep.
It's so funny. And so that's a very rare game. It's like some of the earliest Sierra games, like the first couple, like Skeet Shoot and another one that are like extremely rare. This one is also really very rare. But it's a California Pacific computer company, and I guess Richard hooked you up with CPC because he had gone through them with a Calabeth, right?
Yes, yeah. And, at that time, I don't know how much to go into it, but yeah, so California Pacific faced some management problems. And so that's why I wasn't really sure if it ever got published or not, because things were kind of crashing and burning at the time.
Yeah, I think it did though. Yeah, the owner just ran the company in the ground, but yeah, it did. It was published, and I think it even had program as like a sub label on it.
Yeah. Well, I guess I can say legally that as in terms of hearsay, the founder pretty much coked himself out of the business.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, the founder of Uptime Magazine did the same thing to that whole company as well.
Uh-huh.
This happened multiple times. It was the 80s.
Yeah, gosh, we were young.
I know. So you did that, and and I'm sure it was like you're on a roll. You got this game out. You went through Richard's publisher. He decided that he was going to switch publishers for, he did Ultima 1 through them as well. So he did a Calabeth, and then he did Ultima 1 through CPC. It was still 1981, which is when you did Brain Teaser Boulevard. And so you were really doing a lot of programming in 81 because you did write a lot of games at that time. Now, I think that the games that you were publishing then were written in assembly, weren't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so your earliest stuff obviously was BASIC. Those weren't games that were published, but when and how did you learn 6502?
Gosh, well, I have even. Wow, the timeline is all. I would have to really think back on it. But how did you learn? You picked up. I can't even remember the book. Might have been a Motorola spec book on the 6502. Back then, we didn't even have the assemblers were not even symbolic, so we couldn't say the
variables
speaker is at
CO30.
You just had to remember CO30 is your speaker, or
you just had to type it right in.
You'd have a list of a sheet of paper with all these hardware addresses and stuff, and it was all assembly language, and it was just the most basic assembly language. There were no linkers. There was no.
It was one huge file.
Well, back then, one of the big deals later on was swapping disks.
Yep.
When so then you could have bigger programs, but yeah, it was just one big thing. You'd set out your own memory map, and there was no operating system, and it was all assembly language. Yes.
So the interesting thing about it, mainly timeline related, is because Richard programmed Ultima 2 in assembly, Ultima 1 was written in BASIC, and so was a Calabeth, right? So he published it in 82, and he must have been learning. I know that he learned some assembly at Sierra from the programmers there. So how did you get stuff? Did you know assembly before Richard?
Maybe. I didn't even remember that the Calabeth and Ultima 1 were written in BASIC.
Yep.
But, thinking back, that's possible because I actually did my earliest work that I can remember anyway was the flight sequence for, I guess it was Ultima 1.
Yeah.
Doing
you did that work for him.
Doing the graphics, and that was in assembly. Oh, and I can't even remember the graphics library that I was using. Yeah, it's possible that I was doing assembly before Richard was.
Yeah, and the assembly now, if you were doing the assembly during that part of Ultima 1, I wonder if you were using the ROM functions that were used for high res, because you could actually, load up the registers and call those functions to draw lines and H-plot and all that stuff.
I was not using line draw, but there was something that you could draw a pixel. You could draw a dot.
Yeah.
Or maybe, I don't know if I developed this or if it was already there, but then you would provide a 1 bit, well, 2 bits. No, maybe it was 4 bits, but basically draw a dot and then you'd have an offset, up, down, or left or right, and then draw another dot.
Oh, that's a shape table. Yeah.
And it
so you were using XDraw and that kind of stuff with the shape tables.
Yes. Yeah. So that's what I used for that in the earliest days. And after that, it was all
bitmaps.
Bitmaps, yeah.
Yeah. So that's interesting, because I remember like when the review for Ultima 2 came out in Soft Talk magazine, like the first thing was like, oh my God, Lord Bruce has learned assembly language and this game is amazing. And then I remember Chuck Somerville telling me, yeah, he was at Sierra learning how to code assembly with the Sierra programmers in the cabin. And so I'm like, oh my God. And I think I even asked Richard that question personally. So that was interesting, just timeline wise, how that all worked with funny. Your learning, learning assembly to make, I guess, the Creepy Corridors, Apples That Minesweep, and Space Race for the Laugh Pack.
Yep.
Now, who came up with first of all, how did you get the name Chuckles?
That's all right, honestly. So Richard had his, what would you call it, nom de plume?
Yeah, Lord
British at the time, and I was thinking, well, okay, I'll come up with something. and the funny thing is, Chuckles goes back to high school. People just call me that. And I thought it was appropriate, and I liked it for the the style of games that I was into.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I ran with Chuckles.
So,
even today, people call me Chuckles, and they don't realize that was my published name 35 years ago.
Yeah. They don't call you Chuckles because they know from the Apple II world, they just are calling you Chuckles.
It just comes up. Yeah.
That is funny. Yeah. So when you did this stuff for online systems at that time, Richard had swapped over, I guess. He switched over from CPC over to Sierra because they could make a cloth map and put it in a big box and all that kind of stuff. And then he told you, hey, you should publish with Sierra.
I don't even know if he told me that, but that's who he was publishing with, and it was just the easy in.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I was making games. It's like, of course, Richard published through these guys, sent it into them.
Right. Yeah, there weren't that many publishers back then either. So.
What was it? Maybe 3. Broderbund was, I think, around.
Yep. Sirius was around.
Sirius, and I think those
Soft Tape.
I don't even remember Soft Tape, but
Soft Tape was Muse. Castle Wolfenstein.
Were those the guys out of? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, there weren't that many, but they, because the industry started in 1977 when the Holy Trinity of computers came out, and by 3 to 4 years later is when there was the beginning of an industry, and like that's why Soft Talk magazine could even exist, because it could have advertisers, and these companies were publishing and want to advertise and all that. So there was a nice small amount. It was so small that everybody knew everybody else at that time.
Oh gosh, this was before you were around, I think. The game developer conferences. I remember one of the first GDCs, that we had our booth and
like a West Coast Computer Fair.
You're right. It was West Coast Computer Fair.
Yeah.
We would have 40 attendees,
It's so crazy. I know. Early days.
Back in the day.
I have the first West Coast Computer Fair program from, I think it's April 15th of 1977, in pristine, perfect condition.
Wow, it's 77 or 87?
Yeah, no, 77, because it
Wow.
started really early. It started when, like microcomputers and Byte magazine and Kilobot and those magazines were out, and they started in 77. That's when like people were actually buying computers instead of building Heathkits. They were actually buying a finished computer like an Apple II TRS-80 and a Commodore PET. So that's how the industry started, was enough people could buy computers they didn't have to build. So yeah, the West Coast Computer Fair was around, for several years, but it was still so small, still very, very small amount of people. And so you kind of migrated over to online systems, and you wrote Laugh Pack. And was that just like, hey, there's some cool arcade games I could make Apple versions of, and decided to like put 4 of them together?
I think my initial games were just really small, and Ken Williams didn't see them as
$30
sufficient to stand on their own. So it's like, hey, why don't we bundle a few of these, and we went that way.
Now with your Brain Teaser Boulevard, it was one of the craziest things I've seen, where when you're taking the person across the street, you're drawing the characters sideways.
Oh yeah. Well,
yeah, of course.
It's funny because I'm thinking, all right, I'll name it. Yes, Frogger was a strict top-down view.
Yeah.
But that just seemed that a top-down view of a person. What was the first game that had a person walking around that actually looked okay? But even so, it's
Choplifter, maybe.
Or what's that?
Maybe Choplifter, or like Aztec. Swashbuckler.
I can remember icons specifically where you have like a blob in the middle, and then 2 blobs to the sides, which are your shoulders, and then little blobs that would alternate left and right, and those are your feet. I didn't want to go that way.
Yeah, you don't want to. Well, actually, Ultima did that, right? So you were like, I'm not going to do the Ultima thing. I'm going to draw my way.
I don't even know. But you're right. That never occurred to me. That yes, it's a kind of a disconnect. But
you know what? You used that same character in Creepy Corridor. You're drawing your character as the exact same one sideways in Creepy Corridor.
Oh, the
Creepy
same
corridors.
Approach. I would hope different icons.
It was.
I don't even know. But but that's right. That's right. Creepy Corridors was the same way. Yeah. But go look at Pac-Man.
Yeah.
You could say the same.
It's sideways, yeah. Oh yeah, totally. It's 2D sideways.
Yeah. This disconnect between top down and a side view of whatever you want to make side view didn't strike me as a disconnect.
Yeah, it was. Well, the thing is, back then, everyone was doing everything brand new. Like every game was a new thing. So, it was just now the things are standardized, and you kind of look back at everything. When you look at it now, it's like, that is very different. That makes that game really unique. Just that one thing is probably the most unique thing that I've noticed compared to every game is the sideways drawing of the character.
Oh, yeah, I never thought of it that way, but that's a very astute observation.
So it's very unique in that way. Now, when you did Lunar Leaper, which was your next thing, what I thought was interesting about Lunar Leaper is like Choplifter. It's kind of, it reminds me of Defender and Choplifter kind of mixed together, because you got a scrolling mountain terrain at the bottom, and you got these leapers that are waiting for you to fly over them so you can jump up and eat your ship, and they move sideways, and they kill the little people that they touch. Yep. And Choplifter is the same thing. They're like, the tanks are rolling over people and shooting them and all this stuff, and planes are bombing and all that, and you're just trying to save them. But your game came out before Choplifter did.
Oh, funny.
Yeah.
That I remember when I was well, like I don't know what the figure is, but I believe they say that what half of what we remember is made up.
Yeah.
It's not genuine. It didn't really happen. It's just fabricated in our own minds. But I do remember my inspiration for Lunar Leapers. Richard and I have this memory of we were taking a class. I don't even know what with at University of Houston Clear Lake.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I have this idea of a side scroller. So the notion of a side scroller did exist. I don't know
Oh yeah, Scramble was out and
where,
Defender and that stuff. Yeah.
yeah. And I want these things to jump up, and they have these long legs that trail behind. And I envisioned the whole thing. And this is during a class that I think I jotted down some notes. It's like, hey, I have this idea for a game, and I was making these games at the time. This was before. Well, yeah, it had to have been before we drove out. Before we went out to, I guess Richard drove. We all drove out to Oakhurst in '82.
Oh, okay.
And God, is that right? It's got to be.
Well, Coarse Gold was the first location, and then they moved to Oakhurst.
Well, the mailing address was Coarse Gold. I think that was Ken's home address. But as far as, and maybe it started in his home, but the only office that I knew of was in Oakhurst.
Okay, and you did see the office at that point.
Oh, yeah. The office. Okay. I lived in the Octagon house, the flop house for programmers.
Yeah, so who else was living there with you?
I can't even remember. I do think Chuck Somerville might have been. There were a couple of guys. Gosh, again, so long ago. Who? Mark. Oh,
Mark Ducano?
Yeah.
He did the copy protection.
I think he was living there. Yes. I was Mark Duchesneau.
Duchesneau, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. He might have been there. I can't remember, but it was just
that makes sense.
Empty house. I think I lived on a blow up mattress and no heating. It was freezing.
That's right. You're in the mountains. You're in the Sierras.
We were in the mountains, and the Octagon house. That was basically where they'd say, "Hey, come on out." We were all in our early 20s.
Oh yeah, who's not just throw the sleeping bag down?
So Ken Williams was cheaping out and not paying for the heating.
It was in the woods, man. There's like stories of that as well, like at Soft Disc, where the guy who owned Soft Disc also had these houses that were the bare minimum, like they had dirt floors in them, and like when they were hiring new people before they found an apartment, they could like put them in these houses, and they would want to go get an apartment because there's a dirt floor, and this one guy said he's like watching TV and a worm pops up out of the ground in front of the TV. He's like, I'm moving.
But it was free.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It was awesome. It's totally free. Who doesn't want to do that? I'll put up with a lot. Maybe not cockroaches, but camping out in a cabin in the Sierras and making games all day.
Yeah,
that would have been great.
Yeah.
So Lunar Leaper was a cool idea. Did you come up with that name with 2 E's even?
I do not know. It was either me or I'm getting a flashback of John. Was it John Williams, Ken's younger brother?
Yeah. He was doing marketing. Yeah.
John might have come up with it. I cannot remember.
And it was, I guess they really liked the character because they used the character in ads, and they also started doing Learning with Leaper. If you remember that.
Yep.
So how did that happen? Ken just said, "Hey, we want to make some other stuff, some educational stuff for kids."
Back in the day, we had like 1-page contracts, and they pretty much that contract gave them all the
They do it all the IP ownage.
IP.
Right?
Yeah, pretty much. And so it was theirs to do with what the character, the name was theirs to do with what they wanted.
So while you were at Sierra, at some point you learned how to program the Atari 800 and the Commodore 64.
Well, but those are both 6502, so it's the same assembly language. It's just
totally.
Yeah. So it was just a matter of picking up the new hardware, the hardware registers, and whatever basic,
whatever the hardware was, really, like.
Well, the hardware and the software, whatever I hesitate to call it operating system, but whatever library calls. I don't think the Commodore had any. Actually, I don't think the Atari had any either. But so you could keep. I did a lot of ports. You might, I don't know, might have questions about that in a minute. But so the ports were really just a matter of converting the hardware I/O, the graphics.
Yeah, because all the game code could be basically the same.
The game code was exactly the same. Yeah. And people would hit me with bugs, on my ports, and I would say, check the Apple. I would port Ultimas. This was on Ultimas, and I'd say, check the Apple version. If it's on there, it's not my bug.
Yep, it's not my fault. I ported their bug. So did you learn it so you could do ports? Like, did Ken say, hey, can you convert these over to other computers?
The markets were changing. So it was apparent that, I would have to, learn new platforms. And it was it was fortuitous that they were all running 6502 because it made it pretty easy. And I did traditionally, I've been closer to the metal and more of a programmer than the game designers, which really didn't have to worry so much about the underlying platform.
Yep. So you were going to do some ports, but you did at some point. I think Ken asked you to port Jawbreaker to the Atari 800.
That might have been one of my first, and that was one that I wrote on the Apple II version.
Olaf Lubeck wrote the Apple II version of that.
Not Jawbreaker 2.
No, Jawbreaker 1. So
right.
Olaf wrote Jawbreaker 1, and you did the Atari 800 port of that.
No, I did Jawbreaker 2 because they were.
Yeah. Okay, we'd have to take your credits off Moby Games, I think.
No, I didn't have anything to do with Jawbreaker 1.
Wow. So how did you even get to, like, Ken goes, hey, Jawbreaker was a really great game for us. Can you do the sequel? He didn't ask Olaf to do it? Is it because he was doing Frogger, or?
That might have been, but the fact was they were getting sued for, they were sued for Jawbreaker 1, and they won the case.
Yeah.
And again, this is my memory of it. Ken was not, even though they won the case, gosh.
Yeah, I remember it was a big deal.
I can't remember the attorney's name. Oh, nice guy, but he was there, on site. That was a big deal for him. It's like, I won the Atari, I think it was Atari lawsuit.
Yep.
But Ken was not comfortable with it and wanted to roll out something that was, different but similar. And so we came up with Jawbreaker 1, and I did that on the, Jawbreaker 2, and I did that on the Apple II, and then I ported it to, yeah.
And did you ever talk to Olaf Lubeck?
I don't think I ever did.
No?
And now, was it Olaf that did, no, it was John
Harris did.
Harris that did Jawbreaker 1.
No, Olaf did Jawbreaker 1 on the Apple II. I think maybe David did the Atari 800 version of it.
Oh, I don't even remember. I'll have to take your word for it. But Yeah, that's that. So Jawbreaker 2 I did on the Apple,
Yep, and the
and
Atari.
then later for the Atari. Yeah, and that was probably my first port because I had written the Apple version.
Now, when you did this port, and you're gonna like port the code over, there isn't a way to like take any disk from the Apple II and put it in the Atari and make it work. So you had to create cables that would plug into both these computers. Then you had to write software that would actually send data over the cables, right?
That is correct. If I remember right, there were 3 bits available, and I wrote software to move files from my Apple to my Atari, and maybe the 3 wires was the Commodore. I can't remember.
It was the Apple. It was the Apple. It was actually. Did you use a telephone cable for that?
Not just a regular. No, it was all handmade stuff.
Okay, because telephone. If you buy a telephone cable, it has 4 wires in it. One can be ground, and the other 3 can be data.
Yeah, I don't even. It was probably just a serial, an RS-232 cable that I cut up.
Oh, okay.
Used what was there. For the record, all of that hardware and software exists at the University of Texas, Game Archive? Yeah.
Nice. Yep.
I donated, after carrying all that around for decades, I finally donated it. And that, but yeah, all that hardware and software still exists in a box in Austin.
Have you talked, do you know who Joe Garrity is?
He's
the Origin Museum guy. He's the one who basically is he has like everything from Origin.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're like friends on either LinkedIn or Facebook or both, but I had not remembered that was the connection. But yeah.
So he must know that you did that, because what's weird here is that when I worked at Origin in '87, so this is years later, my first job was to port your game. 2400 AD.
Yeah, ironically.
From the Apple II to the Commodore 64. And I had no cables, and I asked everyone up in New Hampshire, hey, so what do you expect me to do here to get the data over? And they're like, we don't have anything here. Why don't you call Austin, talk to Alan Gardner? So I called Alan Gardner, and I asked him, so I'm doing the port, do you have anything down there? And he's like, nah, we don't have anything.
No one had anything.
Except you did have it.
Maybe that's why people called me for the ports. Well, because, yes, you're right. I made all that, and I wrote the software, and because you couldn't buy these,
nope.
The cables. What cables? You couldn't buy them off the shelf if they didn't exist.
You had to solder them.
Yeah, it was all homegrown.
So, I went to Radio Shack. I got telephone cable. I got solder and soldering iron. I got the Commodore joystick D port thing, and the 16-pin little IC chip for the Apple II because of that I/O port inside there. And I basically soldered it up on both ends and wrote the code to do all the transfer myself. Because there wasn't anything else. I had to do the same thing that you did years earlier.
I was going to say, I don't think the Apple II even had, the notion of a serial port. None of these computers had serial ports. You just had to.
The Apple had a joystick port, but it was that I/O port. It was that chip inside, like that 16-pin thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's with programmable I/O.
Yeah.
But there was no RS-232.
No, you had to buy a Super Serial card, and the Apple IIe did have a serial port, but that was years later, like 83.
Right. You buy serial cards. Yeah.
Yep.
There was no UART, that you have on today's.
I know.
At an Arduino here that's the size of.
Oh, it has everything.
Twice as big as my thumbnail. Got everything on it, including your programming port.
So let's see. So with Origin, at some point, like you're doing all this cool Sierra stuff and you're doing ports and everything. And then Richard's like, I'm starting Origin. do you want to come along with like he and Robert and I think his dad was helping, right?
Yep.
And so like, hey, do you want to come along?
Yeah, that was pretty much it. I'm gonna start my own company. Enough of this. They're taking too much money.
Yeah.
Why don't we keep this for ourselves? Do you want to be a part? And I was like, sure.
And so you guys figured it out, and then they're like, we need a game, because he's making Ultima 3, and they need something to publish. So you wrote Caverns of Callisto.
That is correct.
And that was the first thing to come out with the origin name on a box.
I appreciate you mentioning that, I guess, but because, again, as I remember it, yes, Caverns of Callisto was published before Ultima.
Mm-hmm.
And it was
before Ultima 3.
It was Ultima 3. It was the first origin release. Yeah.
Yep. And one of the interesting things about Caverns of Callisto that I noticed, and I don't know if you got this inspiration from Nasser, but for your fast scrolling of your, flying through the caves and stuff, and the way that you were drawing, it was either every other line or every few lines that you were drawing the walls.
Every fourth, yeah.
Every fourth line, okay.
Every fourth line. It was really,
the Apple II could not push that many pixels, right?
yeah, or I couldn't make it do it, but.
Well, the hard part was you're also having to like erase as well. But if you keep them all on a fixed 4 lines, then you're able to just re-rasterize just those lines. Like that's your trick, is to do that.
I think on that I probably cleared the screen rather than because you would also have to erase the objects that you draw on top. And so I think I was just doing a complete screen clear. But I'll tell you, the code that I did, even drawing every 4th line, people, do you remember the term self-modifying code?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I had a big block of draws, and I guess this was for a line across. It had to have been a line. I had a block of code that would lay down your pixels across the entire screen, and to draw a line, and it was all just right with
that's right,
hard-coded addresses, maybe with an offset for your
load A and then blam.
But I had code to draw an entire line, and I would inject a return, RTS, where I wanted the line to end, and I would jump into that block of rights where I wanted the line to start, and that's how I drew a line.
Yeah, that makes sense to go super fast.
No loop at all. Yeah.
No, it's a fall through. It's called an unwound loop.
Yeah. And then afterwards, I had to put the original code back in because, the original write commands, because, the next line, you don't know where you're going to start and stop.
Exactly. So who taught you about unwound loops?
No one.
You just figured it out.
Yeah.
That's a great optimization.
It's in a way, I guess, maybe sad, but as far as I know, at least me, all of this was self-taught. There was no, as far as I knew, there was no literature. If it was printed. There was internet.
There was only one book that I know of. I think it was Apple Graphics and Arcade Design by Jeffrey Stanton in '82. He's a guy who owned Continental Software, and he wrote Alpine Skier and a couple other things. And he was the only person to write a book about how to do raster graphics and everything, unless you were going to read Bill Budge's stuff in SoftTalk. But it was rare to have any information on how to actually program commercial games.
I don't think it existed, and that is true. I did pick up techniques here and there, and I guess it was probably just SoftTalk because that's kind of all there was. It was none of the academic publications are available. If they were, I was unaware of them.
Yep, totally. Yeah, so it It was what's interesting is I don't know if you saw this, but Nasser Jabeli wrote a game called Phantoms 5, which was like a pre-Xevious. It was basically like a bombing run, and it was basically the entire game was the background drew on odd lines, and the plane drew on even lines. So the plane could go up and down, and the background is constantly scrolling down, and they never overlapped each other. So he could do the optimization with, clearing to black certain lines and just drawing, doing the same kind of thing that you did.
The optimizations that we did back then were just crazy. In fact, it reminds me, no one may know this, so you mentioned Jawbreaker 2, but even then, those big blocks of graphics were hard to do on the Apple, and the rolling faces. There was no erase. Let me think.
There weren't sprites. There was memory. You're putting data, numbers in memory.
Well, yeah, we didn't have sprite. The great thing with the Commodore 64 thing was that you could actually define sprites. Apple II didn't have any of that, which but I was not doing an erase draw. I was doing an exclusive OR draw. And so to make those faces move, I would only draw the leading edge. The net result was that I would draw the leading edge and erase the trailing edge and the differences as they rotated.
Yep.
and it was done with an exclusive OR operation, and so it only worked because they had a fixed delta from frame to frame.
Yeah, I know, it's so crazy the different optimizations that people use for specific situations that graphics were supposed to be drawn at. It's nuts because some people would have functions that were putting drawing characters in memory at fixed locations, like a load A store at this location in high res, load store to be really, really fast, and the shape had to be there, and if it had to move across that row, it would do like a comma Y or something after it, but it was still fixed on that row, so it was,
right.
It's just nuts.
It's all very, very specific purpose optimizations. Yeah,
and it's an assembly. Like on top of just knowing assembly, you have to know these crazy optimizations and how memory is laid out, like the totally messed up high res memory map.
Oh gosh, yeah, the Apple was a mess.
Yeah, if you ever had programmed double res, it's so much worse than high res. It's not twice as bad; it's 4 times as bad. It's really horrible.
I seem to have a memory of that was that like Apple. I want to say 2C specific. I never did any of that.
It was any Apple II that had 128K in it. You could do double res.
Right, it was too specific to the hardware, and so I never went.
Oh yeah. It was 2 64K banks, and you could hit a soft switch, and it would switch over to the other 64K bank. So you better have your code written in the other bank, right? Yeah. And you better not do a return while in the other bank, because your stack return pointer was in the first bank, right? When you switch to the second one, it's nuts. It's nuts, and the pixels are even worse, because it used only 7 bits instead of 8 bits, and there were 4 bits per pixel. So the second pixel on the screen is 3 bits in the first byte, and then you have to hit the soft switch and take the next bit for the second for the end of that pixel.
Oh gosh. Well, I remember the 4:3 mapping in just the regular Apple graphics, but
yeah,
I never did any double res stuff.
It was so much worse. It was a nightmare. I was the final like Apple II game that I made was a page flipping double high res scrolling like semi 3D thing, and that was the end of Apple II programming for me after that. Not because it was hard, but it was because the industry crashed at that time, so it was time to move to the PC.
Right. things changed. Exactly. The PC became the apparent go-to platform.
Yep. Yeah, so you were doing Origins ports as well, right? You were like porting stuff to the C64. Now I know that Dr. Cat also did ports on the C6, to the C64. Were you doing the Atari ones, or do you remember which ones you were both doing?
Don't remember that he was doing ports, but yeah, oh gosh, I don't know how many. I guess all I ported were, I didn't. Good grief, I would have to look through my project list, but I did Jawbreaker 2, and then I think I did 3 Ultimas to multiple, either the Atari or the Commodore or both.
That's pretty great. Did you know Keith Zabalui?
Yeah, we grew up a block from each other.
In high school too, right? You knew him in high school.
Intermediate school, yeah, when we were kids. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you remember, like, he actually was working on Ultima 2. Like, he did some stuff in Ultima 2.
I do not remember what he did in Ultima 2.
but you remember what you did in Ultima 2, right?
He was around. Well, this is going way back, and so.
Yeah, 30 years.
Prior to Origin, yeah. He was part of the original D&D group.
Yeah, that's right.
And we were neighbors, but no, I can't remember what he was doing. He wanted to do his own things. He eventually did, it was branded a Calibeth, I think, Escape from Mount Drash, something for the.
Yep.
Oh,
Vic.
The Vic 20. That was it. No, yeah. Or was it Vic 20? It was a little bitty hand.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was his. That's like one. Like, it's funny. That's like one of the holy grails in game collecting, is to get that Drash, is what they call it, just Mount Drash game.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a rare one, but how was it even released? Was it tape?
It was tape. Yeah, it was tape. It was released by Sierra, and it was on tape for the Vic 20. And it's super rare. It's really, really rare. And so people know, like, oh yeah, Richard allowed him to use the Ultima name for the game, because it's such a small thing that it wouldn't be noticed if it didn't have some kind of connection. And so that's like, because it's got the name on it, because it's connected, it's a really rare game now.
Yeah, I believe it.
But he did something on Ultima 2, because he has a credit on Ultima 2. Now, didn't you do the intro sequence with the dragon head breathing fire and stuff?
I did several of the intro sequences. Again, because I was doing the graphics. I guess that's because I was doing the graphics in assembly language. And Richard was more interested in the game design.
Yep.
This is when he was moving off of the straight, and he did a lot of the programming.
Yeah, in Ultima 2, he did assembly, which was finally.
Yeah, I can't remember when he finally stopped and hired people to do the programming. But
probably on 3 and 4, I think.
Yeah. I would have to look at. Go ahead.
Yeah, Ultima 5 was the last one developed on the Apple II, and that was like a pretty decent sized team making that one. But yeah, with 2, it was still really small. Like, Ken Arnold did programming, and you knew Ken, right?
I know. Ken's a friend. I'm still in touch with Ken.
And he did the music. Like, he was the guy who wrote basically all the music on all those early Ultimas.
He was the music guy, yes.
Which is amazing. And one other credit with Ultima 2. Do you know Mary Taylor Rollo?
Gosh, I do not. I hope I'm not embarrassing myself.
Well, that's because nobody knows that Mary Taylor Rollo is Margot Comstock's nom de plume in Ultima.
God, yeah. Well, I'm thinking Mary Margaret. Yeah. Well, I know Mary Margaret. Yeah. I did not know that was her nom de plume. Yeah.
Yeah. So she wrote the manual for Ultima 2, She loved the Ultima series. It, of course, got a glowing review in in Soft Talk, but not as Mary Taylor Rollo. That was the only way that she could write that manual was to have a different name because she was such a huge fan.
Although I have to point, is it Mary? What is her married name now? Because I don't think it's Comstock.
Well, Tomervik. So it's Margot Comstock Tomervik because Al Tomervik is her husband.
No, I was going to say Comstock is Margot's. I'm confusing the people. I'm thinking Mary Margaret later. Margot and Al Tomervik.
Yeah.
Margot. Yeah. Comstock. That's what I was going to say. It's like, wait, I think Comstock is the last the maiden name of the Soft Talk founder, Margot. Yeah. Okay.
Yep,
I did not remember that, but yes.
Yeah, she used Comstock in Soft Talk. I think just so it didn't look like the two were married. Like, oh, the married couple is running Soft Talk, possibly.
Oh, funny. Yeah.
And the top 30 lists at the end of Soft Talk magazine, which is really critical early industry data that doesn't exist anywhere else. Are those the top 30 and the top 5s in the different categories?
I remember that was a big deal.
Yeah, and Al Tomervik is the person who was on the phone getting that data. He called everyone to ask how many copies they sold. So he had to do it manually every month.
Oh, funny.
Yeah. So you did this, you did a lot of stuff with Origin, and eventually you left in 1988, which was after 2400 AD, and then you wrote 2500 AD, and then they decided that they weren't going to publish it. So then you just I'm gone, right?
No, it wasn't that at all. I don't even think, gosh, and I don't even remember the details of 2500 AD. Maybe this is
it looked pretty cool.
a blanking out, but no. If you go into that, I will say, and I think I said this on I've said this before, that I left Origin because I thought they were too focused on the Ultima line, and that they needed to diversify. And
they were diversified at the very beginning, even with your stuff.
Yeah, but the whole focus, it's easy to say that. Well, the company was Ultima was the cash cow.
Yep.
And
until Wing Commander.
Well, and that's what saved the company.
Yeah, but you left before that. But you told them that they needed to do this, right?
Yes, I don't know if I told them, but yes, I felt that they were too focused on Ultima. And
they did have. Do you remember Times of Lore?
I do. I can't remember who.
Yeah, that was Chris Roberts. That was his game before Wing Commander.
Yeah, but yes, so they almost went out of business, and it was diversification, I think, that saved that company in the early 90s. Now they rolled out a lot of other products, but Ultima continued to be the cash cow.
I remember that. Yeah, Knights of Legend. Do you remember that one?
I do.
Yeah, because that was Todd Porter's.
Oh, I was going to say, I can't remember who did it. I remember Todd Porter.
You do, because he used to be at Penguin Software, and then he came over from Penguin.
You made a comment earlier. Oh, I guess it was about soft tape, I think. And I was
thinking,
I was thinking those guys from Louisiana. And
the soft disc.
and I think Penguin was out there.
Penguin was in Illinois, actually.
Oh, Illinois. Okay.
All right. That was Mark Pilzarski.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, he and I recently connected. Well, within the last 12 months.
Oh, wow.
And I had associated them for some reason with Louisiana. But anyway, Knights of Legend, Times of Lore. I can't even remember when those came out.
$88 for Knights of Legend, and I think the same for Times of Lore.
Wow.
They took a while to build.
Wow, but it was definitely Wing Commander that
That was it. Yeah, that was needed. It was needed. Yeah.
Well, and in all fairness, Origin, we did release. I can't say they. I was part of it till.
Yeah, you were there.
We had Mobius and
yeah, Windwalker.
Pardon?
Windwalker was the sequel.
Yes, yeah, and then the Stu Marks. I'm still a friend with him. Was it Tank? Was that how it was?
It was. Why can't I remember? No, it was probably originally called Tanked, but it was called Omega, and I was in the naming meeting in New Hampshire.
Yeah. So we
Stu came.
Other non-Chuckles, non-Origin.
Yeah. Yeah. Not too many though.
By the way, I have a whole slew of original posters that we printed.
That's amazing.
In the 80s, which is sitting rolled up in my closet. But we did, I think it was it Ultima 3?
Wow.
And Tank and Mobius. And then whatever, maybe it was Caverns.
There's Auto Duel. You worked on Auto Duel.
It was Auto Duel. Yeah, that's right. I've got those. We printed posters for 4 games. I have all of them. Oh,
wow.
And one of these.
If those on eBay, those would go nuts. Like
I was going to say, maybe one of these days I'll put them up on eBay because I look at some of these stuff. It's like, well, I've got a dozen of those sitting.
Yeah.
I'd like a Caverns in my office. I'll pay good money for that.
Yeah. Yeah, eBay is so big on this big box game stuff. And just, I think it was yesterday or the day before, Doom had 3 episodes, and the first one was shareware, which meant it was just free, right? And there was a box made for it by a different company, right? We allowed them to use the cover art for the box, so it looks like it's an official Doom box, and it was shareware, and it was in the store. Well, someone just sold one of those boxes on eBay yesterday for $6,000, and it was shareware.
Oh gosh, just the box?
It was with the game in it and everything, but it's a shareware version, not the registered actual purchased full version. It's just the shareware free thing.
The funny thing is that the discs that I have, the floppy disks that are that old, the freaking labels are falling off. The glue is completely gone.
The glue, yeah.
It's completely dried up to powder, and even an original pristine game is falling apart.
Yep. Yeah, it's funny. I think a lot of the labels on those, obviously it was the glue that ate them up, but I think that the gold label ones survived the longest.
Oh, that's possible. That's possible. But yeah, I just remember the stuff. Actually, I don't think I have any 5 1/4 inch. I actually have a box of 3 1/2 inch discs here, and but all of that, it's so old that the glue is completely gone and the labels are falling off.
Wow.
You should try and salvage them with the applesauce product. Just in there and salvage those just before they. Stop working.
So we basically we just had John Morris on the podcast a couple episodes ago, and he's the guy who makes this hardware box called Applesauce, and basically you plug your Apple II 5 1/4 inch disc into it, and you can see it's either the newer discs or the old disc 2s. They both plug into this box, and then the box USB plugs into your Mac, and you just run his software and you put the disk in and just say, get it. And it just reads it off, and boom, you're running it in an emulator instantly.
Oh, wow. I was thinking just file transfer, that it looks like a file system. But
it actually makes a lovely disk image as well. It's beautiful. So it makes a disk image. It can salvage the tracks.
Yeah.
It actually just images the disk, so you see the spiral tracking and all that copy protection is there. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, so it doesn't try to interpret everything. It basically reads the magnetic flux information off the disk. So whether it's protected or anything, it doesn't care. It just reads it all in a special new format called the WAS format. And and it can decipher the WAS format, and it boots the protected disk just as if it's the real disk put in there. It doesn't deprotect anything. It just reads the straight magnetic information off of it.
That's wild. That reminds me of my one hacking adventure. Gosh, when was this? I can't even picture where I was when I was doing the programming, but it was, well, it had to have been in the 80s. That I actually hacked a game. Oh, I can't even remember which one it was. But the funny thing is that I duplicate, and it was all with disassembly. You go and read code and
oh yeah, you're boot tracing, right?
Boot tracing, all of that. But I could duplicate these disks, but they would create copy protected disks. So it was just kind of a bit for bit duplicate.
Yeah.
But you had to go down and interpret everything that was going on at the same time. And Craig, you mentioned the spiral.
Yeah, that was Mark's copy protection method.
Spirodisk, yes, yeah, that was a big deal. And talk about bizarre, but I don't know how long it lasted, but it definitely lived. It was there.
Yeah, the Apple Store program, you can actually print out an image of what the disk looks like, and so the spiral track disks look awesome.
Oh wow,
pretty amazing.
It's funny.
So I was going to say the funny, speaking of lack of operating system, this is all very, very Apple II specific. That the disk drives, we did have RWTS, read write track sector.
Yep. 256 bytes.
But now that I think of it, the copy protection didn't even use that, and so that was the key, is that we were writing to write your copy protection. They would circumvent that, and you actually had access to the hardware for the floppy disk on the order of the magnetic changes. There was no notion really of zeros or ones on the disk. They only existed as transitions.
Yeah, it was a nibblization scheme that you had.
Well, not just nibblization, but your bit itself. There was no one on a disk. It's just a magnetized or not magnetized edge.
Yep.
And it was all the edges, and you had to. All of that was done manually by the guys that did the copy protection.
And even crazier was that the disk 2, right, the first disk drives that got that could be cheap enough to make into a consumer product, had a defect where you couldn't read too many zeros in a row or it would stop reading, which is why he had to create the nibblization method.
Well, that has to do with, I believe, serial synchronization. If too much, because of variations in the rotational speed, and as with serial I/O, you can't print, you can't write 1,000 serial bits because your time differences are such that you get out of frame sync. And so kind of the same thing with the too many zeros in a row. You lose your synchronization with the rotation of the disk.
Exactly. Yeah, because the Apple II didn't have that synchronization in that, the little hole in the center of the disk that was used for synchronization in more sophisticated drives. The Apple II drives didn't use that to sync.
Right. Right.
Did you learn all this back then?
Yeah. So you just went through, let me think, there were that for the hard drive, for the floppy drive, that was probably, I don't know where that data was. It might have been just published by somebody, published on soft disk by somebody that hacked it, or it might have been just a chip spec sheet.
There was a magazine that was out back then. I think it was called Hardcore Computist, and it was completely about deprotection.
Yeah, but as far as the specs on how to write to the floppy, that might have been just going to the spec sheet for the chip that they use.
Yeah. Well, they had to have that to even build the disk 2 interface.
Yeah. But again, as far as any operating, there was no. The only operating system there was read-write RWTS, read-write track second.
That was it. Yeah.
But you could go lower, and that was all available to the masochists.
Yes, yeah. It was all of those CO82, CO81 toggles to turn on the stepper drive and move it a quarter track and all of that stuff.
That's it.
32 cycle reads and
well, and counting clock cycles for your individual instructions. It takes one more clock cycle if you take the branch than it does if you fail the branch, and all of that.
See how you remember all this?
Oh, I know. It's all useless today.
It's burned in. So when you left Origin, I think pretty soon after that you started Craniac Entertainment, right?
Craniac. When did Craniac is just kind of my own thing, and so I was doing my own thing, and again, I make these associations. I have these memories of where was I when this happened. It's like I remember the house where I was when I told my friends, it's like, okay, I need a name for my company rather than Beuche Development, which is what it was for a few years.
Oh, wow.
And I basically told them, it's like, I want something, light and brainy, and, that would work with Chuckles and a friend of mine, still a friend of mine now, David Sandel, one of my best friends in the world, came. Wow. Basically, I told my friends, I'm looking for suggestions, and I'll take anybody out to eat that, I'll buy you dinner if I like the name. And David came up with Craniac, and it's like, I like that. That's good. And so I started with that. That would probably have been in like 93, I think.
Okay.
94.
And then at some point you worked with Velocity.
And yes, that was my first trip to San Francisco. And I drove, they gave me a job, and I drove out here and worked with them. They had some of the most, that was 1994.
Yeah.
Amazing offices on the 30th floor of Embarcadero 4, dead
Holy
on
crap.
San Francisco.
Financial district, right?
Yes. Our office was right on the bay. It was amazing. And
so, yeah, they were doing games at the time.
Yes. Yeah.
So what game were you involved in at Velocity?
Gosh, what was it? So they made their name actually doing, if not the first, it was definitely one of the first LAN games that was like what was the old vector graphics tank game from the 80s, the arcade game?
Oh, you mean
Battlezone.
Battlezone 1980, yeah.
Yes.
They did a networked Battlezone with raster graphics, probably for the Apple II. I came in after that. What did I work on with them? I can't remember what it was initially. Maybe it was a port of that. But later, interestingly enough, I don't know if maybe it was after I left Velocity, but they had this is way early, and I believe they might have been one of the first, if not the first company to license a property, and they got the license for jet ski. And I did initial work on Jet Ski Rage, and that was a jet ski game for the, I guess it would have been the PC. at the time. I don't think it ever got released, but this was like 3D graphics.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I worked on that with them or after them. It's probably with them. I did some demos for NVIDIA. Some of their, again, maybe their first 3D demo was a jet ski simulator. You're on a jet ski with waves and stuff like this for their very first 3D graphics cards. We did demos with them.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, do you remember a game called Strife that they were publishing?
It rings a bell, but I can't remember what it was.
Well, it was a shooter RPG. It was an FPS RPG that used the Doom engine.
Huh.
It was in 1996 when they published it. I don't know if you were there in 1996.
I might have left because I was there for 2 years and I left by 96. I was, gosh, where did I go? I went to LA and I can't even remember.
Well, you went to Zatrix, right?
It was
right after
Zatrix.
that?
That's right. It was like, what was I doing in LA? But yeah, so Derek McLeish was the CEO of Velocity. That's right. So he left Velocity and went to Zatrix in LA, and about 6 months later, I followed.
Oh yeah, and they were doing Redneck Rampage.
Redneck Rampage was just as I was leaving there. Their claim to fame was they had some good compression technology. They had a rail shooter, again, whose name I cannot remember, but it was really good and really fast because of the video compression. It was kind of JPEG derived video compression that worked really, really well with a fixed video format rail shooter with things that would move around within that movie.
Yeah, it was called Siberia, right?
Siberia, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Redneck Rampage, gosh, now we're coming more into the modern day. That's only 22 years ago. 25 years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had left Zatrix just as I was in on the initial research work for Redneck Rampage. And
well, did you go to Shreveport with them? Because that's what they did.
I was going to say, I was on the epic Shreveport trip.
Amazing. So did you guys go by the lake house, the id Software Lake House?
I don't think we did. We went down, Drew.
Markham.
Yeah. He grew up in Shreveport. And so we went down to some summer camp.
Oh, wow.
There was a lake involved. We and met some strangers who just took us on, and we got on the boat and took off across the lake to have, I don't know, barbecue or something at some place. Came back.
It was Cross Lake.
Yeah. But I was on for all of that. I do not remember going to the id. I don't think we went to the id Lake House.
Huh. Yeah, they were inspired by id, and they wanted to go to Shreveport to just kind of research to see some id landmarks like Softdisk Office and in just central Shreveport, and also just to get the vibe of the whole place to for making this redneck game. We
definitely got the vibe from the summer camp, and yeah.
Johnny is it Johnny Cash? No, Elvis's guitarist lives on Cross Lake, so if you went across Cross Lake to the other side, he was one of the houses there. Oh, funny,
but
alligators.
that was the epic trip. I don't even know how long we spent there. I remember getting stopped for speeding on the way back. And ironically, in the same, I pulled on the Texas drawl. We were in a so I grew up in Houston, but we were driving back and through what is it, Rockwall.
Yep. Yeah, Rockwall.
Pulled over for speeding. And, I told him, it's like, yeah, we were doing some research in Shreveport. We're just trying to get back to the airport and get home. Maybe you know my brother, David Beuche, who lived in Rockwall at the time.
Oh, wow.
And I think that was the only time I was let off. He's like, well, slow it down and get home.
That's crazy. What crazy luck.
Because otherwise, I'm driving with a California driver's license. And
yeah.
But yeah, they let me off. But yeah, that was the epic, not Epic Games, but the epic Shreveport.
That's funny because so when we started id Software, there were just 4 of us, and one of the founders of id, his name's Adrian Carmack, and he grew up in Shreveport, and he's lived in Rockwall for decades. Like he still lives there right now. He lived in Rockwall when you were in there, when you got pulled over.
Yeah. Well, my brother's still out there, but he's moved east to was it Greenville?
Oh, Greenville.
Even further out in the sticks.
Yeah. I actually lived in Quinlan, which is also in the sticks.
They live on the road to Quinlan.
Oh my God. I lived out nowhere. Like they had some cool names out there, like Blackland and Gun Barrel. Those are in Battle Axe. Those are names of towns out there in East Texas.
Yeah, I believe it.
That's funny. So you basically did this. You worked with Zatrix, and then you decided to leave there after what was it? What were you working on when you decided to leave?
Again, well, maybe I shouldn't be saying, it's a story of my life. I didn't see much potential there. It being a closely held company, and I was never going to be one of the original guys, and so I quit.
Yeah, Drew and Barry.
Yeah. I can't remember if I quit first, but I rolled straight, or if it was kind of a synchronicity that I quit the company and rolled into, I think it was synchronicity, the vertical reality project with Sega GameWorks.
That's right.
And
GameWorks was happening back then.
GameWorks was happening, and I did I ended up, I left Zatrix and went straight into GameWorks and did the software for the vertical reality game.
That's pretty cool. I think I saw the vertical reality game at the Sega GameWorks I think it was in Dallas or Fort Worth, one of those.
It's hard to, Grapevine.
Yeah, that's right. Grapevine, it was right between both of them.
Yes. That, I don't know if it was that was one of the early re-releases. I don't know what you would call it. Our first opening was in Seattle. And wow. I think then it might have been Grapevine, and then what's in Arizona, Tempe. And they opened a few more, but
the Sega GameWorks to me was like, if you're not going to have classic 80s arcade games in an arcade, Sega GameWorks is the kind of arcade that you should be in. They had a lot of really good stuff.
I was just yesterday, I was looking at videos. And you can, if you want a flashback, do a YouTube search, and I think it's like 1997 MTV GameWorks premiere, and they've got like a 25-minute segment on the whole thing, and it's a good throwback. Sadly, for me, there was no reference to vertical reality at all.
Oh man. Yeah, have the video. It's a premiere party that they have up there on YouTube. I'll watch that later.
I didn't realize it's like Beck performed, and Coolio, and they had lots of actors and actresses.
Wow.
Yeah, I was just there nervous about, is it going to crash?
Yeah. It's funny.
TV.
One of the kind of interesting things is when you're you were with the Zatrix guys, and they also were like doing an FPS, like when they were doing Redneck Rampage, and people were playing Doom and Doom 2 and Heretic and Hex and that kind of stuff, and like that was just the time of those games, and those guys were inspired by it. Now, if you remember Greg Malone, right? Who made who made Mobius and Windwalker. He worked on Duke Nukem 3D.
Oh,
yeah, in Dallas.
I didn't know that, but yeah, it doesn't come as a surprise.
Yeah, he was a producer, or one of the early producers on it, and he also worked at Softdisk just before that.
Yep.
So kind of crazy how the same people are like still in the same areas, working on the same kind of like what's going on at this time, working on those things.
Yeah.
So after GameWorks, how long did you work on the GameWorks stuff? Was it just Vertical Reality, or was it another project?
Just Vertical Reality. I can't remember how long it took. Maybe 8 months, maybe a year. Then I was doing my own thing for quite some time. I worked on, God, I would have to look at my project list. I did kind of a dark ride concept with John Snoddy, who was the, creative director, I guess. I don't know what his title was at GameWorks, but he was big thing, creative guy. I did some work with him. Then later did some work with Big Screen Bingo with him, and what was the company? Oh darn! Again, I don't have. I could pull it up, and it would refresh my memory. But we were the purpose of that product is the value proposition was to take movie theaters in the afternoon, say at 3 o'clock when no one was there.
Yeah.
And we developed a multiplayer bingo experience that we were hoping to bring people in to the theaters in the afternoons. And it was in a game show format. We had pre-recorded everything, ball drops.
Wow. It's like you don't know Jack for bingo.
MC comments and all of this. Yeah. And we developed maybe I don't know, a half a dozen little interactive games that you would play, and that was before '94. That was in the not '95. It was in early 2000s, and they did deploy in Canada, and they still might even be deployed. I'm not sure, and I think they might have deployed in the UK. Problem in the US was that there's like one company that owns specific time slots for movie trailers at practically every theater in the country, and so there were contractual problems getting into the U.S. I believe.
Wow.
For that reason.
God, if only they knew, they wouldn't have even touched it.
Yeah, well, like I said, they deployed in Canada.
Yep, and other countries.
Pretty sure in the UK, but yeah, the US was tricky. But so basically, yeah, I was doing contract work, and I did a chess game before it went online, 3D. I was one of the go-to guys for 3D graphics because there weren't so many of us then.
Yeah,
20 years ago.
Wow.
And Chess Master. So
that's cool.
They had licensed, I think, Sargon.
Oh my God! Wow!
The Sargon,
I didn't know that.
The Sargon chess engine, and so we relayed this with a 3D chess game. With like
what year? What year was that?
Oh, it would have been like.
It was the 2000s.
Yeah, it was.
You know that chess engines are public domain.
It had to have been 2004 because again, I have these location associations, and I was living.
Oh yeah.
I was living at my place off of Greenwich and Franklin in San Francisco when I wrote that, and that was in 2004.
Wow. Yeah, there's always an anchor, right? Like where was I?
And Chuck, if we go back to 2000, I think that's when you worked on the Terminated 2 3D experience. I'd love to hear about that because, I mean, if there's anything that I've enjoyed in my life, it's going on that experience. It's no longer there, but what an amazing experience that was.
It's no longer there in some places, but you're right. I did that in 2000. That was probably, I can't remember how I got into that, but it had to have been associated. It was because the controls guys that I worked with on Vertical Reality were theme park controls guys. They brought me in after we worked together on Vertical Reality. They brought me into Osaka, where they were building a new park, and I did controls engineering for T2 3D. No programming at all, but it took me way back. My degree is in electrical engineering, and so the hardware and the electronics and stuff I love working with, and so I loved that work. Interestingly enough, or not, I'm thinking 2 years ago, I worked again for Universal Studios in Osaka doing controls for the same guy I worked for in 2000, Chris Patrick, and for a new attraction, Sing Live. And there, Terminator was running 2 years ago, and I got to see the whole show for the first time.
Why you didn't see the full show then? You worked on it, but you never experienced it.
When I was there, I left before it opened. Yeah. I for the final checkout, I didn't. We had some really scary, dangerous effects, and I was not comfortable being the person to do final checkoff on those. And so I did leave, and I never saw it open until 2 years ago. And the funny thing is, it's in Japanese, of course, in Osaka.
Of course, there was a lot of complicated stuff going on in that experience. I mean, they had like these Terminators shooting across the audience. People pulled out shotguns in there, and it's pretty crazy. And then I think at one point they rained down water on you and a lot of stuff.
Yes, we had about 20 different special effects. I think about a half a dozen vendors and 20 effects, and that was a cool project. People don't realize. So, did you see it in Orlando?
Yeah, in Orlando. Yeah.
Okay. So they did open. They installed several installations. Gosh, yeah. I was going to say, it runs. It's a 3D. John, I don't know if you're familiar with the T2 3D at all.
I didn't actually see it. Yeah, it was gone when I went to Universal.
It's like a haptic show, and but it's in 3D. You wear your 3D glasses, the polarized lens glasses, and it runs on this wraparound. You're actually running. We're running on 3 different screens.
Huge screens, yeah.
Wide format. I don't know what it is. 70 millimeter film on 3 screens with 2 projectors on each screen because it's polarized 3D graphics. So we had 6 projectors running that all had to run in frame lock for that thing.
Wow.
That by itself was a big challenge. And the whole effect where the Terminator comes out of the screen and onto this, it becomes a transitions from a screen presence to a physical on-stage actor.
Wow.
Is a really scary effect. I guess I probably shouldn't go into the details of it, but it involved really large things moving in less than a second. That and if it wasn't timed right, you could end up with someone cut in half on the stage.
Wow.
On the stage in front of 750 people.
That sounds dangerous.
Make sure that doesn't happen. And so that's why I left. I didn't want to be on the final checkoff because the first controls
danger.
Yeah, in 2000.
But I think
the fact is that it is designed. It was an amazing experience, and I love that work for the fail-safe design and some of the stuff that goes on even today with self-driving cars and some other projects I've been associated with. I tell people, it's like, okay, you realize eventually this wire is going to fall off. And
bad things.
I was working on a project, and a guy wanted to stabilize a dragster driving it. He wanted a gyroscopic stabilizer for a dragster driving at 200 miles an hour, right? It's like, okay, this is fine, but you need to realize you have to design this for a failure, because if this one thing happens and that gyroscope starts spinning, it's going to spin that dragster like a top down its path of travel. Do you want that happening? And they're like, oh, no. Anyway, these kind of concerns are what goes into a sound interactive experience design, and I just loved the work.
When you worked on the T2 ride, of course, it introduced the T1 million at the end, right? Did you ever work with James Cameron? Because he pretty much produced the whole thing. He wanted it to be like a little extra movie, so he was always involved.
I think our installation was the third installation, and so Cameron was not around.
Okay, all right.
Old news for him by then.
Right.
He's probably doing Avatar.
Or something. Yeah. It's funny. I was watching the GameWorks, that MTV reel from 97, 98, and there's Will Smith talking about his upcoming movie, Men in Black. And
wow.
Blonde just coming off of Swingers, and it's like, wow, that's
amazing. Takes me back.
Exactly. But yeah, Cameron, I don't know what he was working on at the time.
So basically, in all of these years, you kind of migrated from programming computer games to programming, I guess, experiences, right? And doing more of the hardware side of it.
The last 20 years, I think I've had a pretty good run doing more. It's location-based entertainment, and from theme parks to theme park attractions. I had a good run making I did 5 attractions for Disney. That was all software, but it's still location-based and working with weird hardware. It's not sit at your desk and play a game. The last few years, a free roam virtual reality, which is really cool, but has extreme challenges in a retail environment.
Oh yeah.
Not only the technology, but hygiene. If you want to, and throughput. Basically, it's kind of a it's a dilemma that the better experiences have more space.
Yeah, location-based VR, basically.
Yeah, location-based VR, free roam VR, where you can walk around. It's only effective if you can walk around.
Yep.
And there's only a certain number of people that you can have in that space at a time. And so when it comes down to revenue dollars per square foot, there's a real challenge there.
Oh yeah, and COVID really wrecked that whole idea. Like now, who wants to put that on?
Yeah.
And it's funny because in the 80s, the kids didn't care about who had the joystick with boogers on their fingers. Like no one cared.
Joysticks are different than a sweaty thing that you're sticking on your face.
Yeah.
And there are solutions there. They've dealt with this with 3D movies for years. You have your glasses and they wash them all the time. And so in VR, you're going to have a detachable face pad. And maybe that's happening today. Maybe it's not. I don't know. The whole, even the retail VR, I think is still in flux. I haven't been looking at that space for a couple of years. Yeah, it fascinates me. Here's another throwback. In 1990, designed and built my own six degree of freedom head tracker and head mounted display. I built my own VR system in 1990.
Wow.
It had wide field of view. It wasn't to the fidelity that they had with the really expensive stuff in the 80s, but it was to almost the degree of fidelity that we had when the original Oculus came out, in 2002, 3, 4, 2, 3. Which is to say, throughout the 90s, all the VR solutions were terrible because their field of view was terrible. And what I built in the 90s had a very, very wide field of view, but the chromatic aberrations due to the extreme optics, the prismatic effects were terrible. Not to mention the fact that I can't remember, it was like a 640 by 480 display per eye. So the resolution was bad.
Yep.
But I actually built that. Speaking of VR today, I built my own system, and the tracker was an articulated, it was like, so I have a lamp here. You hear it squeaking? I have one of these articulated desk lamps, right? Well, I'm trying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Anyway, you can build a system like that that's all this mechanical Frankenstein harness and attach it to your head-mounted display, which is on your head, and actually track your physical position as well as your rotation. I built all of this in 1990, and it ran. I paid $3,000 for a Silicon Graphics 3D graphics card that did smooth, no textures, but it did smooth shading per triangle.
Polygon, yeah.
And that was the state of the art back then, and it all ran, it all worked in the end. But I figured, there are people. I wanted to do a race car game. A VR, sit in your car and have the vehicle shape.
Which would work in VR, being stationary, not having to walk.
Yeah. Well, except that it does tend to make you yak if you're in VR, if your environment is moving around you, but that's a whole different thing. Anyway, it all worked, but in the end, I figured, there are guys spending way more money on this than I can, and so I went on to paying work. Can't remember what that was, but
so you've basically been doing this for a while, and you've been doing it as contract work, right? Most of what you've done has been as a contractor with another company, like even Origin, you were contracting, right?
The bulk of it, Origin, when I started, I was a founder, but any money I got was as an independent developer.
Right.
Game that the money I got was my royalties.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I guess we had some distributions, but
a lot of people are used to being full-time employees of companies. Like I'm a full-time employee, and then I leave and I go get hired by another company, and you're used to being a consultant, just doing work for a company. You can leave anytime you want and go do something else, or maybe even do multiple things at the same time.
That's hard to say in public because it makes it hard to get. Lately, I'm just looking for paying work.
Yeah.
I have had regular gigs. I had forgotten this, right? There were 2.5 years there between Vertical Reality and Universal. That's right. That I worked at Dell, and I was there. I was the guy for their entire consumer desktop line that had to bless any factory installed software. So that was a regular staff salary position.
A regular salary thing.
Did you know? What you mean is the bloatware, right? The bloatware on the Dell machines.
No, what did they call it? It was not craplets. It was, but
that's a good one.
There's some
bloatware,
derogatory word. And my job was to make sure that anything that was shipped with our system did not impact performance or stability.
That's good.
And actually, it was a kind of important job. And back then, it was, for better or worse, we were very, very focused on magazine reviews, and you did not want to get dinged on any point on the magazine reviews. And if some of the factory installed software,
for bloatware
was responsible for that, I was the guy that got talked to. But
so you didn't last long. No, I'm just kidding.
It never happened.
That's great.
I worked it was a good friend of mine who hired me, and I worked for him for 2.5 years, and we're still friends.
That's great.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, that's all. We're still good friends.
So one Apple II programmer has his entire life only been contract. He has never had a full-time job anywhere. And that's Nasser Jabeli.
Nice job if you can get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
it's hard.
All the work I did for Disney was on contract, and I'm very comfortable in that realm. And in fact, right now I have a job now, and it's a salary job, and it is fitting. In a way, it's fitting. I'm working on software for self-driving boats.
Wow.
So it's not Disney attractions, but
yeah,
it's not Salesforce either.
Yeah, but you're basically still writing code to interface with hardware that does something that's interesting. Like self-driving boats is a whole nother realm,
Yes. And sad for me, I'm not interfacing with the hardware at this point. That's all abstract. But
okay.
It is interesting work, and it's on salaries. It's not contracted work.
So stability. That's the one thing,
Stable. Exactly. It's stable.
Great. I don't think I have any other Apple II questions. I think I blew through all of that stuff. And I'm glad that I could ask some questions that I don't think I've ever seen anywhere.
Oh, cool. Good.
And you could actually remember, which was really nice. Like you actually remembered all this stuff.
Oh, yeah. It's like, wow, so far.
It's ROM.
So far. 10 years from now, I don't know.
Yeah, that's why you got to do these interviews.
I'll have to refer back to my notes.
Yeah. Go to the University of Austin.
Yeah, or these interviews. Oh,
yes.
I will say, speaking of the Game Archive and Apple II games, I was recently contacted by Steve Jackson.
Oh, yeah, so was I, about AutoDuel.
About really? Yeah. And he was looking for code and source code, and I actually turned him on. I told him, it's like, hey, I don't have any of that, but it was all donated to the Game Archive in Austin, where he is one of the founders. And so he is engaged with him. I don't know what he's going to do with the original code, but
he gets it.
That's not for me to deal with, but it's all there. They have all of it.
Yeah, because it's basically from Car Wars.
Well, I mean, we built it on top of Car Wars, but AutoDuel was a major departure from the Car Wars tabletop game.
Car Wars was the inspiration.
It was definitely the inspiration, and it was licensed from Steve, but yeah, the game Car Wars is turn-based, where AutoDuel is more real-time, and I actually had to push for that. I think Steve had hoped for more of a turn-based game, but in the end, I think everybody was happy with it.
Yeah, definitely, it's a classic. I remember being at the Origin office in '87 and going into the storeroom and seeing the stack of AutoDuels and Caverns of Callisto go almost 2 stories high, and then the box full of the little tool sets for AutoDuel.
Oh yeah, I have
those little trinkets. Yeah, isn't that cool?
Right,
and they all work. That little wrench works and everything.
The funny thing is, we're talking about the labels falling off, is that even those, the plastics, I'm pulling this out of I'm looking at one. Oh no, that looks like a trade show freebie. This says UCB Pharma. But no, the plastic falls apart and breaks on the screwdriver, which...
Oh, yeah, that's right. It was the little handle, right?
Yeah, the plastic handle is bad. Oh, wait. Under the trade show freebie there it is, Origin. See, I wish we had video here.
Yeah.
I actually am holding in my hand an Auto Duel toolkit right now.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think people probably sell that on eBay too. They sell everything.
I know. Well, and I'm thinking it's like, oh, maybe I could get a bonus by signing it, except my handwriting's too terrible and nobody can.
It's a signature.
Me or not.
Cool. Well, thanks for putting up with all these really old questions.
No, that's all fine. I've enjoyed it. Originally I was thinking, gosh, an hour. Am I going to be able to talk for that long? But
I know.
Apparently so.
There's a lot of detail back then. Cool. Well, yeah. Thanks a lot for doing this, and it'll be great to have on our podcast. Yeah, I think Doug Carlston and Stuart Smith were some of the previous ones.
They were. Yeah. And thanks very much, Chuck, from my side as well. It was great having you on, and so much cool stuff we spoke about in the last. I think it was 2 hours now.
Yeah, I know. We've run over 1 hour by a long shot.
Yep.
Greg, did you have any other T2 questions?
No, I don't. But it was just I was looking through what you did, and I couldn't believe that you worked on something. It's just such an amazing thing. I had to ask you about it.
Nice.
Sure.
Yeah. But if you're ever on Facebook and join any of the groups, the Apple II groups, take a picture of that toolkit there, and I think people will probably make you offers or something.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Apple II enthusiasts group.
Yes.
On Facebook.
Well, yeah. And I've got boxes of the games too. But it's like the wraps on the boxes are coming off and stuff. Some of them, even the plastic wrap, the shrink wrap is falling apart. They're so old.
Wow. Well, it's still authentic.
Yes.
And if you're selling it, you'll definitely the price will be pretty high.
If you ever put any of those Caverns of Callisto posters on eBay, I'll probably.
Oh man. Oh yeah. Yeah, those posters definitely. Yeah, because game art also is another big thing. Like people that have like the original paintings for game art. It doesn't have the title on it or anything. It's just the painting from the artist. So I know Dennis Loubet did Caverns and some of your other games.
Yep.
Any of that stuff.
Well, some of the those posters, it's kind of sad. Well, even I guess I collected the games as they went along, the boxed games, but even the posters, they were throwing them out.
Crazy.
Be sure I remember Jeff Hillhouse. I was there at Origin.
Yeah.
Hey, we're throwing these out. Do you want any? I'm like, yeah, sure. Give me
I'll take all of them.
They give me a few of each, but yeah, they threw out hundreds.
Yeah, I know Joe Garrity is like the one who would be manic if he knew anything like that happened. In fact, when they were killing the Austin office of Origin, the really big one, they basically shipped everything to Joe. So he had tons of boxes of stuff come to his house.
Well, people would consider it heresy today, but the Origin wake at Richard's property down on Town Lake in Austin.
Yep.
They had a stack of paper design notes that was 10 feet tall that they burned.
Oh my God. Wow.
It was, it was a bonfire of design notes.
That's crazy.
So.
Wow. Well, you were there. You were there for a lot of cool stuff.
I literally have the T-shirt.
Yep. Cool. All right. Well, thanks a lot.
Thanks very much, Chuck.
for spending your time. It was very cool.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Thanks for having me. This is great.
Apple. Time Warp.